So I appreciate you inviting us into your home. Today we're going to talk about basically all things plants.
Yeah. Should I introduce myself?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay, my name is Lara Wadsworth. I am founder and owner of Flourish Garden Consulting. I'm a horticulturist, and that's what I like to talk about.
Cool. Mm-hmm. So all things plants. Mm-hmm. So what are plants?
What are plants?
Yeah, what are plants?
Plants are organisms that photosynthesize is one example of a definition.
So what got you into just loving plants?
That's actually a funny story. Well, it's not funny. It's an interesting story, I would say. So when I first went to college, I thought I wanted to do communications. I thought I was going to be a communications major because I liked to write. And so I thought, maybe journalism or something like that. But I took one communications class. I think I went for 2 class periods and I dropped it. And then I was like, I don't want to do that.
What was it that made you not want to do it?
It just was super boring.
Yeah.
It was just super boring.
Oh, yeah.
It was terrible. Plus, I think it was at 6 a.m. One of those classes. So anyway, I dropped that, and then I was like, okay, I need to find something else. So I started taking different intro classes.
What was your major
classes.
Starting off,
it was communications.
That's what you said. Yeah. Sorry, my bad.
And then I took an introduction to plant science class, and it just totally engrossed me.
Yeah.
I loved it so much. I loved my teacher. It was just so interesting. I just loved being there.
Was that early on that you came across that?
I think that was my second semester in college.
Okay, so you're pretty early.
That's good. But that was all I did. I just took that one class, and then I left to go be a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in South Texas. And so I got this really long break. And then kind of towards the end of my time being there, I knew I was going to come home, and then I was going to need some kind of a career trajectory. And I knew that I had really liked that class, but I didn't know if that was really what I wanted to do or if it was a good option for me. Anyway, but I just really felt that it was the right thing for me to do because I liked it so much. And so I remember it was a springtime, and I think I was visiting home from college, and all of the plants were just blooming, and the leaves were coming out, and it was just an overwhelming I love plants. This is amazing. It had never hit me like that before. You know what I mean? And so then when I finished being a missionary and I went back to college, I just dove straight into horticulture and haven't looked back since.
That's great. That's great. So that's really cool. It seems like you had an experience of awe that really solidified your just enthusiasm towards this area of nature.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
I would also like to point out that as her sister, I know that she's had the spark of this in her forever because she used to eat dirt.
That was a baby.
And it helped you grow like a plant.
Yeah.
So I've heard you talk about dirt and soil. This is my question. I took a jog here. So we're close to the Grand Rapids area, very beautiful Michigan. Michigan is just one of the coolest states, really. And so I'm running, and I'm at this garden, and it's the it's Michigan University extension for their garden area. It was called what was the garden?
It's called the Grand Ideas Garden.
And the cover garden is the segment
cover
of
garden.
The Grand Ideas
garden.
It's
a garden within the garden.
There was a sign for the cover garden, which was what I was at. What did it say? I'm going to try to remember. So this is a cover garden. We've selected a wide variety of species to, cover the ground. And essentially that these have been picked out to specifically thrive in a variety of full sun to partially shaded environments that you'll find in West Michigan. Mm-hmm. I was thinking about the impact that covering the ground would have, even in urban areas. I've heard of how that just could really help cool, even on top of cities. It takes more water and stuff, but it could help rather than the sun just baking into the concrete.
Right. So,
but my question to wrap it up is just I was thinking about if you were to parch the ground. That's probably, sorry, I'm talking a little. If you were to parch the ground, then that's going to damage the plants naturally because that's their food source.
So what do you mean parch the ground?
Like just really, if it's covering the ground, I think that's protecting it from the sun. You're able to have more moisture. If it's just a bare like field with no like plants and foliage, then it's not going to have as much richness in the soil because it's all kind of like baked by the sun.
Right.
And I'm just thinking like, what's the importance of soil in the plant relationship, and why is covering the ground significant?
Okay, that's a really big question. So plants need soil to thrive.
Yeah.
There are ways of growing plants in soilless mediums like aquaponics, but you're constantly feeding nutrients.
Yeah, so it's kind of unnatural.
So basically what the soil does is it's a medium for the plants to receive their nutrients. So it's kind of like food in a way, but it's also kind of like their house in a way. And so it's crucial for plants. Soil health is really important. But then as far as ground cover goes, ground covers are really important for, I'd say, like 3 main reasons. The first is erosion control, because when there's just bare soil and there's no roots, there's no plants, when the rains come, it just washes away the dirt. And then that's when we have, coastlines eroding and, landslides and just like losing topsoil, which is actually a really big problem.
Yeah.
The Dust Bowl.
What's the most rich part of the soil? It's not topsoil, is it?
It's the topsoil.
So it is topsoil.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's pretty detrimental too. Okay.
Yeah. But then also, ground cover preserves the soil's nutrients as well, and the moisture. So, so even though plants need to be like watered, if you choose the right ground covers for your area, then they're adapted to the area and you don't have to water them, and they retain the moisture in the soil by, shading the soil.
Okay, so that makes me think of like native plants. Like, what's the different? They said they've selected those to be custom to the West Michigan environment. What's important about plants being in their environment? Is there any significance about that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, so the benefit of choosing native plants to grow is that they are perfectly tailored for the environment that they're in. And so they won't overtake other plants. They won't do bad things. They will contribute to the ecosystem rather than drain it.
Yeah, like rather it's symbiotic rather than a parasitical. Can it be parasitical with different plants? Like, could plants be a parasite?
I don't know that parasite would be a good word, but there are invasive plants.
Invasive.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think about like when you go to Hawaii and stuff, you can't even like bring like certain snacks that are seeds, like fruits.
Yeah,
and
they regulate it pretty heavily.
Yeah, and so that's obviously why, because it could just disrupt the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Is it really that sensitive?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Plants that become invasive, they only get that term when they can reproduce really rapidly, and that causes them to like overtake other plants.
They outcompete everything else that was native there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a corollary or parallel there to the cultures of humanity?
I know about plants. I don't know. I feel like less so with humanity, because we're all the same. We're all the same species. You know what I mean? Whereas plants are different species, and different species can't interbreed, for example.
Yeah.
And so while these plants that we have, plants are vastly different from each other. You know what I mean? That's why we have all of these taxonomical names, like the Latin scientific names. It helps us to delineate what they all, like how they reproduce.
Because there's so many of them too.
But us as humans, it's just a matter of cultural differences mostly. And I think that with proper communication, anybody can integrate with anybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but what is culture? Because I think culture is the kind of home or food that we are nourished from, similar to what plants are. And I just think about plants, like they could be sustained even in tiers that they're not, the zones or whatever, that they're not native to, like tropical. You have a more tropical plant here that wouldn't be natural to,
right? Because
it's indoors.
Because I have cultivated the proper environment for it.
Exactly. So I'm just wondering if like maybe some cultures need a little bit of cultivating to be welcomed into other cultures that are like vastly different. I'm just talking off shooting from the hip. I haven't had these thoughts before.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a big correlation between plants and humans in that way. I think there are a lot of correlations.
All right, let's talk about it. What correlations do you see?
I think that we are all delicate. Plants need proper environments to grow and flourish properly. And to reach their potential. And same with humans. I'd say that's like the biggest thing that I notice in my life is like, there are certain plants that they will grow if they have a certain environment, but they might not fruit. You know what I mean?
They're not reaching their full potential.
Whereas if you can give them that perfect environment to flourish, that's perfectly tailored to them, to that plant, then that it will. It will flower, it will fruit, it will reproduce.
It's just about understanding what that plant needs and providing it. I think that reminds me of like love languages, relationships. They're so integral to daily human life. We're social creatures, and knowing each other's love languages, both giving and receiving, is so important. So you could receive that nutrients to bloom and give fruit to the world.
And so a lot of times when people ask me for advice about like, how do I grow this certain plant, or like, what does this plant need, or like general advice about like growing plants, I always tell them to look at its native environment. Where is that plant native to? And then you'll be able to learn a lot about that plant and what it needs. You know what I mean? Because if you have this tropical plant in your home that's used to being, in an understory in a jungle, it needs filtered light, humidity, lots of moisture,
which is very different from like like
a succulent or a cactus
or cacti in the New Mexico or something.
Exactly.
Okay.
And you can't just treat plants all the same, even though all plants need water, soil, light, nutrients, I guess, instead of soil, because you can grow them without soil. Then like those three things are all the same. And I think that's true for humans. We all like basically need the same things, but also all of us are really different in our personalities. And I think
how you're able to receive them.
Yeah. So going back to your original like thought about cultures and stuff, I feel like it's more on a person to person basis rather than a culture basis that we correlate to plants. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That, as you were saying, that made me think about how plants have different needs, but they also like compete with each other. Not every tree can get enough sunlight, at the same time. They kind of crowd each other out. So I'm like, oh, well, maybe humans' personalities aren't exactly a great correlation in that way, because we can all be ourselves without competing with each other. But then I also thought about how in our marriages, like, for example, your marriage, you're an introvert and an extrovert, and you can't both get exactly what you want all the time at any given moment. It's like a give and take and a balance. And that made me think about native plants and how important it is to have the right plants in the right environment together, and how they give and take together, check each other, make sure you don't overgrow and become a hermit, or, like run yourself ragged partying all the time. You balance each other out and keep everything livable. And that makes me wonder about what you were talking about earlier with the zones, and Michigan specifically has had a change recently. Will you tell us about that?
The entire United States, actually, the USDA.
So this is recent.
Yeah,
as
earlier this year. I can't remember exactly like what month, but
just a couple months ago.
Yeah, I'm sure we could find the news article.
I'll put it up.
Link it. Yeah. The USDA officially changed the growing zone map, which is crazy.
Yeah. How did you feel when you saw that?
I was like, wow.
Yeah. First of all, what are the zones for people that don't know?
So growing zones indicate how many days below freezing there are in a certain area through the course of the year. And that obviously impacts how plants grow. You know what I mean? So in Michigan for decades, we were in a 5B, I believe. And now with the zone map change, we're in a 6A, which is just basically a half step warmer than we have been. And so that means that there are less days per year that are below freezing than have previously been averages. You know what I'm saying?
How many fewer days?
I'm not sure exactly. Maybe the news article would say that.
Okay.
Why is it important? How is it important for plants to go through winter? Because like you would think that might just be purely a bad thing, right? Just like kind of freezing them off. What happens? There's like a lot of questions that are coming to mind with the
So
winter.
a lot of plants need a dormancy period.
Yeah.
In order to bloom or fruit. Apples, for instance.
It's like how we need sleep.
Yeah.
That's
You
like
think
their
so?
resting
Yeah,
period.
not all plants, but a lot of plants, especially ones that are native to cooler climates, have learned to essentially harness
Adapt.
that dormancy period.
Yeah, so they don't get it. They're not.
Yeah, like
Yeah, it's out
apples
of-
won't fruit without a certain number of days below freezing.
Man.
And like tulips also won't bloom without a certain number of days below freezing.
Michigan has some of the best like Honeycrisp apples, and I don't want that to go.
Yeah, and thank heavens it's not quite to that point yet.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's only a handful of days that really have changed. I don't quote me on that. But I don't think it's enough to like change the crop yet.
So is there anything that we could like individually proactively do to avoid that? Is this just purely a global warming / climate change thing?
I think
and it's
so.
just like, what would from your perspective, because there's, it's a pretty heated debate, climate change, for whatever reason, it's like pretty political, but just like that aside, what do you think from your own perspective, just for what it is, what can we do to help?
I think the things that would make the biggest difference would be if we can, as just consumers, influence large companies to reduce their waste.
Yeah.
Because we as individuals really don't give off that much of like a carbon footprint. But obviously all of us together do. But what greatly impacts that are the products that we use.
Okay.
And the way that our societies are built, cars give off a crazy amount of carbon dioxide. Cows, we can eat less meat, stuff like that. It's a really big issue.
So
I've heard one of the biggest sources of carbon is actually beets, sugar beets, that the government has subsidized farmers to grow beets more in excess of what we actually need and use. And so farmers are basically being paid to farm a crop that isn't going to be used, and then they pile it up and it like rots and produces greenhouse gases.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I would like to see the sources about that, because I feel like farmers get a really bad rap, and a lot of conventional farmers can definitely do better for the environment, but also a lot of farmers are really in tune with the land.
Right.
And I feel like instead of that happening, if a farmer was like with it, they would use it at least for like feeding animals.
Right.
I've heard of a lot of farmers doing that. If they can't sell their crop for whatever reason, they'll use it as feed. So I would be really interested to see the sources behind that.
I heard that a while ago, and I do know the government tries to stimulate farmers to produce more than the country actually needs, just in case there's another war or something, and or they need to make biofuel or whatever.
Yeah, monoculture cropping is a whole other thing. That's a really big topic.
So what is it called?
Monoculture cropping.
Monoculture cropping.
Yeah.
Okay, so just like going one crop at a time, like soybeans or corn.
Doing acres and acres and acres
every year,
of corn.
or can monoculture still be like swapping every?
It would still be a monoculture, even if you did like
if swapped.
Yeah, even if you did like a whole field of corn and then a whole field of soybeans next
So it's
year. Those
better
are
to
still
grow
monoculture.
Foods intermingled.
Yeah, biodiversity is huge.
See this? Okay. Biodiversity is huge. I just feel like that applies in so many ways. We talked to Eddie Dracovic about urbanism, just like the environment around us affects the experiences that we have. Like having a good, healthy variety of contact with people around us that are different from us, that have different beliefs, it exposes us to new ideas. And I feel like that is good for us.
Yeah, it's all about balance, like you said before. Like that's, again, why native plants are so important, is because they have learned through years and years, hundreds of thousands of years, to perfectly interwork together. And so no one plant overtakes the other. They all do something positive for the soil or for the air or for the other plants. And
do you feel like plants are conscious?
So I remember reading this one study in school once, and if I can find it, I'll send it to you so you can link it. But they did this test where, oh man, what was it? It was like they hooked up these plants to some kind of electromagnetic thing where they sensed the vibrations that were coming off the plant, I think. And plants were able to recognize humans that had harmed them in the past.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Isn't that crazy?
What was defined as harm in that?
Well, they like ripped off a leaf or something
Yeah.
like that.
Oh,
And then
gosh.
the like vibrations would go crazy when that person would go near the plant.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
That is so sad. And that reminds me of what you were talking about with mosquitoes. Tell us about mosquitoes.
So my mosquitoes kill more people every year than anything else. Like in the world.
Did you know that?
Like even heart disease.
Like
even,
car crashes.
Oh yeah.
Whoa.
By far.
Yeah.
And it's because of vector-borne diseases, which is like malaria.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, that's why back in the day in World War II, I think it was, or like the Vietnam War, I think, Agent Orange was
Vietnam.
a big deal.
Yeah.
Vietnam. They allowed Agent Orange, this like really toxic chemical, because it was killing all the mosquitoes. And so malaria rates were going way down. And so they were like, we're saving millions of people by using this. But then they found out that it was bad in a lot of other ways. So they had to stop it. But there's a lot of ongoing research about mosquitoes and how we can save.
Are native plants important in the mitigation of mosquitoes?
That's a good question. I would say yes. And my first thought is because native plants encourage native insect species, which help to balance mosquito populations.
Yeah.
Like they will help to draw in native pollinators, native spider species, native parasitic insects that will, harm the mosquito populations and help keep it in balance.
That makes total sense. Absolutely. You also said that they've kind of evolved through contact with humans. What was that about?
Yeah, so there's been a variety of studies that have come out that have shown that mosquitoes can recognize doorways. Yeah, they like hover around doorways.
Like
I don't know.
this house got a woman with full of estrogen.
Well,
Juice me up.
There's a lot of theories around like what actually draws mosquitoes to us. And a lot of people think it's carbon dioxide, because we breathe out. And then they like are drawn to that. Other people think it's heat. But there have been a few studies that have shown that whether those things are true or not, they've learned to recognize doorways. And I don't know if you've ever had it before, but sorry. I don't know if you guys have ever had it before, but I definitely have, where like I'm sitting right outside a doorway, in my backyard or at a cabin or something, and the mosquitoes are like insane. You know what I mean? But then you go out in the field or go out in the forest and you're moving around.
I always thought that was the light.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a variety of factors. That's the thing about nature, is that it's not just a one and done, like nothing is.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, how has learning more about nature changed your perspective? Like, on the nuance of life.
We are all so connected. And that's why I was crying about mycelium when I was coming off of anesthesia one day. I had surgery I had surgery a couple of years ago. And
Wait, should we just show them? And then you want to give context before or after? Or do you want to watch the clip? Because I think that'd be
we can watch it.
Should we just watch it?
Sure.
Okay. This is pretty funny.
I mean, I watched it a bunch of times, but
Jess, just go, I'll just go like this.
There was like some Lucky Charms commercials on that set. But pizza would be great. And I told Mom to do half of it without mushrooms.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
That's what we did.
mushrooms are the worst.
Mushrooms are the worst. That's
Like-
true.
Like portobellos, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Mushrooms. Mushrooms are not the worst. Just the kind of mushrooms that people usually eat are the worst.
the wheels were turning.
The most popular ones.
Yeah, but mycelium is amazing, man. Honestly, I feel like if I talk about it right now, I'm gonna cry. Oh, this is weird. There's some more.
What was this for?
I'm getting really emotional
anesthesia.
about
I was
mushrooms.
coming out of surgery.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
About the mycelium.
Specifically.
Yeah,
Okay.
it helps the trees grow. If I say any more, I'm gonna cry. We would all die without mycelium.
It's true.
It's so amazing. It helps the trees to talk to each other, and they help each other through the mycelium, and it's just really pretty. Matt, why did you ask me questions about that? It's so beautiful.
I'm sorry, love.
So like,
That's pretty much it.
That's
yeah.
like my favorite ever.
so like that might sound goofy and all, but she's actually saying real stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
like, explain that.
So there's quite a few documentaries that you can watch that are really accessible these days, just about mycelium. And mycelium is essentially the root structure of mushrooms. So when you see a mushroom growing in the forest or in your garden or whatever, that means that there is a vast network of mycelium underneath you at that point. And what mycelium does is a variety of things. But it helps nutrients to be more available to plants. It helps plants, especially in old growth forests, so like really established forests. The trees have been shown to talk to each other through this mycelium and send like warning signals and share nutrients with each other, like using this mycelial network. Those are the big things that I can think
So
about
they
right
share
now.
information.
Yeah.
Basically, like I think of it almost like neurotransmitters.
Yeah.
You know, you have these
It is.
axons.
It's
like
kind of the brain of the forest.
that's so
Yeah,
cool.
and what's amazing, and this is like tangentially related, they saw that mother trees favored their young. That they would, if they, sending warning signals and sharing nutrients and stuff, they would favor the ones that were their babies.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So
Really
okay.
I've also heard
Wait.
recently
Okay, you go.
that they will continue giving nutrients to trees that are long dead. Like
Really?
they still love their dead.
Wow, I haven't heard that.
Yeah.
But why?
Because that's exactly it. But why? Why would they waste it?
It's just
Probably
like
because they have a connection
care?
to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe like a similar thing to
So-
like, even though our loved ones are passed away,
Yeah.
we still like
It doesn't
honor
make
them
sense
by-
that we
Think about
spend a
them.
bunch of money and
Money.
we like
Yeah.
put out food and put them in their best clothes.
So you think they're
'cause we
they
love
kind
'em.
of like are literally
I don't
showing?
know if it is or not, but
You think
I
it's possible that they're
entirely
showing
possible.
respect for the
Well,
dead,
I think
basically?
that there
Yeah.
are different levels of consciousness,
Yeah.
kind of like dogs and humans.
Yeah,
Like,
clearly animals have some
Right.
degree of consciousness.
also, this is my dog, Samwise Gamgee.
Shout out to Sam.
What was I saying?
I don't know.
Yeah. There's different levels of consciousness. And I think it definitely is totally possible that plants have a certain degree of consciousness that we just don't fully understand.
Yeah.
I think that's.
I feel like
I think it's true.
Yeah, I feel like it's more than likely, like you were saying, if the mycelium is the neural connections, then each individual plant would be like a cell in the brain that's connected by and then they would maybe have a consciousness altogether,
Yeah.
rather than thinking about
Individual
it.
plant as
Like
the organism.
that plant
That's
has
a
like
cell.
goals and hopes and dreams, but like the whole earth together is
Yeah.
one thinking,
Organism.
feeling organism.
I really
100%.
believe, to go back to your question of like how has learning about plants changed my perspective, that we're just also interconnected. Like we are some of these cells in this vast organism that is the earth. There's this amazing book by Aldo Leopold called A Sand County Almanac. Sorry, I'm a little congested. And one of my
So nerdy.
one of my absolute favorite quotes from it is that oh wait, no, I don't think it was from Aldo Leopold. Oh shoot.
If you could, I'll correct it here if it's not.
I think it was this girl that I wrote an article about for work a while ago. Anyway, but she said it was Rachel Carson. That's who it was. She was the one who figured out that Agent Orange is bad. Anyway,
Really?
yeah.
That would be an interesting
woman.
story. I would
A
watch that
woman.
movie. I would watch that movie. Screenplay.
I was like, it's a movie. We'll watch it.
No, we should make it.
Okay. Anyway, she said that when man starts to, I like said it to myself so many times after I wrote that, but it's essentially as soon as man starts to try to control nature, he's I remember it. I'm sorry, you're gonna have to cut all that out. Sorry. Man's fight with nature is ultimately man's fight with himself.
It's so
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. So when we are trying to take over and like over cultivate these farms and this land, we are harming ourselves. We need food. So there's got to be a balance. We need these large farms because otherwise we would starve. But we need to also care for the soil with such compassion because without it, I mean, we learned that from the Dust Bowl.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that was crazy.
And avoidable.
Yeah,
That's
so
the
avoidable
craziest part
with
of it.
native
Yeah.
grasses.
So tell us about
Yes,
the
yes,
tell us about
yes.
the Dust Bowl.
So what happened with the Dust Bowl is the government sold a ton of land at super cheap prices to random people who then became farmers and over cultivated the land in the Midwest, like Oklahoma and parts of Texas and other
Arkansas.
yeah,
stuff,
those places. And what happened is almost all the native plants got like eradicated.
They cleared all the native grasses. The grass, like we think of it, we're like, oh, it's grass. But it's like as diverse as like a jungle.
Yeah.
It's just small.
There are thousands of
And
different
they cleared
species
it
of grasses.
all, and then there was a drought,
Yeah.
which happens sometimes. But when there's a drought, but there's no plants to keep the moisture and hold down the topsoil. Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. No, you're good. That's
Yeah, okay.
That's
Can
what
I
I
just
would
point
say.
out
That's
these
what I
two
would say.
are clearly sisters.
We are
like
sisters.
both just in their
we're not
appearance,
twins,
but
we're sisters.
their enthusiasm for plants.
Nerdiness.
Yeah. And so basically when all these native grasses, the prairies of America, when those got wiped out, there was just bare soil, and then there was drought, and then these winds started coming, and since there were no plants and trees, to break up this wind, the winds got super intense, and it started picking up all of this dirt that was not being anchored by any roots and bringing it thousands of miles. Like there was dirt from like Oklahoma or Texas or something in like New York during the Dust Bowl.
And how is that bad? Besides the fact of like the dirt where it came from being just wrecked.
So
like
it- yeah.
did the dirt you said it went from where to where?
Like Oklahoma to New York.
New York. Did New York have in Oklahoma's dirt was like
So-
was that harmful for New York?
So not
dirt?
necessarily was it harmful for New York, but it was harmful for Oklahoma.
Oh, clearly.
Yeah, like the topsoil was wrecked, and so that farmland wasn't farmable anymore. And so these people were starving just because they couldn't grow the food because they didn't have the proper plants in place.
Yeah. It's like, what is it in medicine? Is it like a... Dang it. I want to say like positive feedback, but where like you're...
negative feedback loop. Wait,
Isn't it positive when it gets worse and
when
worse?
it's negative, it's
Like,
it's called
heat
positive
stroke
feedback
is like your
loop.
body gets
It's a
hotter
positive.
and then it reacts to it and it gets hotter and it reacts to it. It was like that.
That's
like,
a positive feedback loop.
Yeah. Got worse and
Yeah,
worse.
exactly.
Yeah. So that's just a clear example of how, whether you believe in like maybe the causes of climate change being this, that, or the other, we definitely can impact nature. And it usually comes when we're
Pushing
it in the excess of what we even need.
Yeah.
And then
It's
it hurts
excess.
us bad. Like
I think that's the
thousands of
thing.
people were starving and lost everything they had.
I think like probably we've been given this earth by God. I believe that we've been given by God, and that because of that, He cares for us as a father. He's provided for us. And if we try to like push that, just like the manna He gave to the Israelites, it's gonna corrupt and it's
Yeah.
be like bad.
Yeah, it's like when I work hard to give my child like a great birthday party, and then I set it all in front of them, and then they're like, "Can I have this else?" Like, where's the rest of it? You're like,
It
what?
spoils kind of the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're doing
it's
that
sour note.
to the
You still
soil.
love your kids, obviously, and I know God still loves us, but it's not living in gratitude for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we can farm the food that we need, but we have to use the ecosystem. We have to use it, work with it.
Yeah,
Does
yeah.
that make sense? We can't fight against nature. We have to, be in a symbiotic relationship with it.
So what does that look like?
So it looks like incorporating a lot more native plants into farms. There's
Could
a
we
lot.
Is that
subsist
difficult
on
to
native
do?
plants like here in Michigan?
That's a good question.
I know they have like wild rice and wild
Native
fruit.
Americans did it. You know what I mean? The problem with it is that it's not, you can't really large scale farm it, which because we have such a large population, we kind of need to do that. But there are ways to large scale farm that, that is more in tune with nature. For example, it's called regenerative farming, right? helps the soil instead of depletes the soil, like interplanting 2 to 3 different crops that are all edible, but that
How
work
close
together.
are they together physically? You say
Like
interplanted.
interplanted.
Oh, just like amongst, yeah.
Yeah,
Which
like-
is how it would be in nature. Why did
So-
we start monocultures in the first place?
because it's very efficient.
It's easier to harvest. You
yeah.
can just like sweep through it with one machine.
yeah, rather than having a different
Yeah.
picking method for each plant.
But another problem with it is if there's a disease, it just
wipes it out.
wipes it out.
Yeah, and that's
Like the
cultures.
potato famine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I think that's like
which-
human cultures too. It's like if you don't expose yourself to like pathogens a little bit, even just like virus to human, let alone human to human, you're gonna like when you get sick, it's gonna wreck you way more than if you kind of willingly confront.
Yeah.
those-
But having healthy people around you helps you to be healthier.
Of
right?
course.
And that's how it is with plants.
Yeah.
When you're able to interplant various plants and have biodiversity, then if one plant gets a disease,
It's not gonna wreck everything.
it won't
as
wreck
much.
everything because the other plants around it are healthy and that disease might not be able to affect those other plants. And then, I don't
They're
know,
like a little
couple
buffer.
Yeah, just a couple feet away will be the same plant, of the same species, but it won't get sick because there's that buffer. And that's why biodiversity is so important.
Okay.
That's so cool.
Hey, Sammy.
That also makes me think about the climate warming. A cold period is also valuable because it kills off pests and funguses and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's why the potato famine was so bad, because in Ireland it doesn't often freeze, like a hard freeze.
Yeah.
So the blight wasn't like killed off with the cold.
Yeah. Ticks have been a big deal in Michigan the past few years, more so than ever before because of that. Because there's
Really?
It's a little
fewer days-
hotter.
because there's fewer days below freezing, and
Which kills them off. That's why Oklahoma has them a lot, because it doesn't have very many days where it freezes.
Yeah. And so
And the soil's not too deep.
Sam got a tick that we had to get removed from a vet in I think it was January or February.
How big did it
Really?
get before you like notice it?
It wasn't too big, but we tried to remove it, and then
was
the
difficult. The head.
Yeah, it got like stuck, and so then we had to get help. But
yeah.
he's okay.
Yeah, that's good.
But that happened literally because of climate change, because there were too many days above freezing in that particular month, of that particular day, that particular region, and the ticks started to be active again.
Wow. Are there any other things like that you've noticed that have impacted you directly, or people you know directly?
Well, I attended Brigham Young University, Idaho, and they have an apple orchard. And I know when I was there, I worked in the orchard for a little while, and they were struggling with this disease that apple trees can sometimes get. I think it's called scorch, actually. It's something like that. It's where the tips of some of the leaves and the branches look like they've been burnt, but it's a virus.
I feel like I've seen that.
And it's really contagious with apple trees. And they were really struggling with that. And I think part of it was because the winter needs to be long enough for the ecosystem kind of reset in these northern climates anyway. In southern climates, the plants and animals and insects have adapted to not have that dormancy period. And so it works out. You know what I mean? But up here, we need that.
Fascinating.
It's really cool that you have like such a wide knowledge about all this stuff,
you.
and like you're clearly enthusiastic about it. I'm assuming with your job writing articles, I don't know too in depth about what that looks like, and you could talk about it as much or little or as much as you want. But I'm assuming the fact that you write about it frequently helps you to collect and catalog all this information that you're clearly able to just kind of rehearse, right? Talk us about, and it doesn't even have to specifically revolve around plants, but just writing. Like, how has that influenced your learning?
Yeah. So writing has always been a way that I've expressed myself.
Yeah, because you wanted to be a communications.
Yeah, I thought I wanted to be a
because
writer,
of writing.
essentially.
Yeah.
But I just didn't like English classes, like college level English classes.
For what reason? The novels?
They were
or-
just way too intense for me, I guess. Horticulture classes are pretty chill. At least that was my experience.
I just didn't like some English teachers where they tried to treat the literature, the like creative writing as an objective, like thing to measure.
Yeah.
You know, and they happen to have the objective standard yardstick to measure
Yeah.
that.
Or
When
they just beat it over the head and like steal the magic and the awe out of the art. Like
Yeah.
they like
Yeah, so in my horticulture classes, I did end up writing a lot, just because in college you write a lot, you know, essays and whatnot, and so I still got a lot of English training, and I read a lot, and you know, just exposure helps too. Anyway, so after I had graduated, I was looking for a work from home job because I knew I wanted to be a mom, and we were still moving around, and so I couldn't really get like an intense real job. And so I was searching.
Depends
for like
what you
6
mean by
months.
real job.
Yeah, well,
'Cause you have
know
a
what
real
I mean.
job.
I
Yeah.
do, but like a
Stereotypical
full
corporate
time
job.
Go
Yeah.
to the office
Yeah,
or
yeah,
go to the greenhouse would be in my
Because
case.
COVID pretty much like, I mean, did you graduate before COVID?
Just after.
Just after.
Yeah, I graduated in 2021.
Because COVID kind of like transformed and changed
did.
everything as
It
far as
did.
what redefined a lot of what we
Yeah.
kind of
And
see.
I think I
as
I
normal.
don't know if my job would still be available remote without COVID, but I think it definitely has showed companies that people can work remote. Anyway, but basically I just had a contact from I took some classes with her. She ended up reaching out to me and saying that her company needed a writer. And so I'm not employed by them, but they like contract me to write a certain amount for them. It's called True Leaf Market. They're based in Salt Lake City, Utah. You can buy garden supplies, seeds. They have a blog and like they do recipes. And so I help them with writing stuff about their website.
Do you do much recipe stuff? Or
I've
no?
done some. Yeah,
that's
it's fun.
cool.
I tried some jam today that she made for them.
Nice.
It was tasty.
That's awesome. So
it
it's
out.
so cool that you're able to have found like your career.
Yeah,
You
it
know,
really has
but
been so
one that's
perfect.
a passion.
Yeah.
You know, so like, do you have any advice for those looking for that? Maybe they're going through communications and they're realizing that they just don't want to do it. It seems like it was a pretty quick transition. You just saw this class that was so, you had a deep experience and just like a draw to it that it just felt right. But was there a period of anxiety, not like feeling right
for
or not
sure.
knowing what you wanted to do?
Yeah,
and how
and I
did you
think-
get through that?
I think that was when I was being a missionary. And for me, that was a pretty spiritual experience. That's something that I kind of left out before. But just suffice it to say that I felt like God led me to this path. Or actually, I think what I should say is that I asked God if this was okay, and he said yes. And he has been blessing me along the way. And yeah, this job has just been so perfect for me because I'm a work from home mom now. And so I can just work when my son is sleeping, and it's perfect. And I get to learn all the time about all these really interesting topics, and I get to write, which is something I've always loved to do. And so
it sounds to me
perfect.
like you're receiving the nutrients that you need and you're starting to bloom fruit for others to
Yeah.
enjoy.
No, it's
and that's
true.
beautiful. And I think like if we as a society try to cultivate like, you know, finding that thing for everybody, I think that everybody has that thing.
yeah.
And
I think so too.
unfortunately with all the distractions nowadays, it's easy to not find it.
But I think
or
it's
to
important-
vicariously like feel like you're fulfilling that need by just like parasocially watching somebody else find it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, so what I think is really important to emphasize is what I said before is that I kind of chose it.
Yeah, that's a
Is-
good
and,
point.
And then God blessed me.
You kind of, you said you continued to get blessed pursuing it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to make a choice
Yeah,
and then see
and
if it,
it
works.
hasn't been all sunshine like sunshine and rainbows and stuff, because you know there were some really hard classes. There were some times that I was like, there's a lot of different types of people who are in horticulture, and sometimes I didn't feel like I really felt like I fit in, but I prayed that it would work out because I knew that I liked it. And it has. And so I think sometimes if you're choosing a career path, you have to just choose with all the knowledge that you have about yourself and about the world, and God will bless you. You know, as long as you are involving whatever higher power you believe in that decision, it will bless you. And because I think sometimes where people struggle, where I've seen people struggle, is that they're so wishy-washy that they never decide. And they're like, well, I could do this, and I could do this. And yeah.
And God's
you
not going to
could.
decide for you.
Exactly. A lot of times, I think I think it's possible that some people could have like one career path that would be like perfect for them. And
But
they
even
have to
there,
do
I mean,
that.
like he's never gonna force you.
Right.
You have
exactly.
to choose.
Exactly.
it.
I think it's really important that we choose what we want our passions to be and then just go for it.
Yeah, that's
you know what I
cool.
mean?
That makes me think about how in college they teach you when you're writing to pick a position.
Yeah.
Because you can't argue if you don't just take a stance.
Yeah.
And if you don't pick a position and argue with it, you'll never actually like make any progress in your learning. Like when you're writing, you don't say, I think maybe it's this. You say, this is what it is. And then you might find counter arguments and like go forward from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just need to be confident in yourself or at least in that one aspect of yourself.
Well, how do you maintain confidence in yourself when you haven't figured out who you are?
I think it's step by step. For me, it was like, you know, I would have a really hard day in school or at work, but then the next day would be awesome. You know what I mean? And it would remind me why I loved it.
Yeah.
So I think it's just having a wide perspective is really important in that, you know, because we can get really discouraged, you know, when we have a hard day or a hard week or a hard month even. But life is long. You know, people say life is short all the time. Life is long, in my opinion. People can change.
Because you like the
that.
body text.
Yeah, I guess so.
We were just talking about like the personality differences. Her husband, Matt, like he likes the intro, conclusion, and the body text is just kind of like filler, you know,
true.
but like she's the opposite.
Yeah, I'm really bad at writing introductory paragraphs because I just want to get to the meat.
Yeah. So that's why life feels long. You're like focused on the meat. Everybody's like focused on the intro and conclusion. Well, not everybody. Anyway.
I think it's important to remember that people can change at the drop of the hat. You know what I mean? Sometimes it takes a long time for people to change. But like there are people who have been alcoholics for years and years and years. Some experience they have, all of a sudden they're sober. You know what I mean? Matt and I have a friend like that. And I think that's how we need to view ourselves, you know? Be okay with how we are right now, but be open to change. And
It's hard balance.
it is.
Because people say do live your truth, be you, you know, but like how is
But
that
you
going to
can't-
serve you when like
if you never change throughout your life, then you will move backwards. I think that's how life works.
you can't you
You're
can't
either-
even plateau. It's like you're either
moving
progressing
forward.
or decreasing.
I mean, you know, with like life in general, yes, there are certain things like, you know, if you're trying to lose weight or something, you can definitely plateau. But it's like, as far as our spiritual, mental type progression, we are either moving forward or moving backward.
Yeah.
At least that's been my experience. With the times that I get slack with like learning new things or with, you know, trying to connect with myself spiritually, it's like when I finally get back into it, it's so much harder.
It's just loss of momentum.
Yeah.
Like literally, it's like it's a physical law. Yeah.
As you were saying that, I was thinking about how, you know, at this stage in your life, you've had, you know, successes and failures, and you've been able to see that when you do put your effort in, successes can come, you know, but I think as Stephen was saying, there are some people that haven't yet had the opportunity to experience
Or even
that.
find the success.
Yeah.
But
And I think something that can help with that is humility, oddly enough. Like when we think about humility is a virtue. Sometimes we think that means we don't put ourselves above anybody else. And that's half of it. But the other half is we don't think we're any better or any worse than anybody else. So you can look around and you can see all these people are making it. You know, these people are finding a way, and everybody's way is different. I'm no better or worse than anybody else. I'm going to try to find my way, you know? And I just really think that we'll all make it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
There was this TikTok that went viral a while ago. If I can find it, I'll send it to you. But it's of this girl who, I think it was something about like changing a tire. Her tire was flat. And she was like, she just like sat down and she like didn't want to do it. You know what I mean? But she sat down and said to herself, boys can do it. How hard can it be? but like not to be sexist, but that's how it always is. You know?
if somebody else could do it, I can too.
Yeah, if you want to. And that going back to what I said before, you have to choose. You have to be committed.
It has to be like voluntary.
Yeah,
It can
and-
never be by coercion.
And that's how like relationships are too. And like plants aren't like, I'm going to be an apple tree today. And then tomorrow I'll be like, I'm going to be a pear tree. You
How cool
it's
would
like,
that be?
I know. I mean, you can do some pretty cool grafting stuff, but that's different.
That's like tattoos or something.
But I think we can learn a lot from plants in that way.
I also think this kind of ties back to what you were saying earlier about how plants need dormancy periods and periods of growth. And, sometimes it feels like we're like backsliding or we're not progressing, but sometimes we actually need a little dormancy period. We need to be still.
That's great.
Yeah.
I heard this poem today that was really beautiful that was talking about like the idea was an elder was speaking to a child, teaching them what to do if they're lost in the woods. And the gist of it is, if you're lost in the woods, be still, stay there. That's like a survival tip. If you get lost in the woods, don't walk around.
If you get separated from the group.
Just wait for someone else to find you. But the takeaway of this poem was that when you feel like you're lost and you don't know where you're going, look around, like be in the present. You can see what's around you. You can get acquainted with it so you can recognize it next time if you're here. Mm-hmm. And also because like the world around you is learning about you too. And, I think those periods of pause, those periods of winter, those periods of not really knowing, those periods of life and death, like it's all part of that huge system that's all of us.
Yeah.
And it's not like one is good and one is bad and we want to stay always in growth. I said this in another podcast, but always in growth is cancer.
Yeah.
We need the give, the ebb and
The life
flow,
and death.
the high
yin and
tide
yang.
and low tide,
Yeah.
For one thing, I think that's why prayer and meditation are really important for humans.
I was going to ask this because you were talking about like your connection, if you're involving God in or whatever higher power you believe in that decision process, that's a huge component. And you talked about for you personally, that was prayer. And you were just about to get into, but I want to hear more about prayer and like what that has meant for you. Has it been always something that because my parents, they rose me, we were fairly active in our church, and my dad, like he's always struggled with like prayer, and I've had friends too that they, even if they are like really religious and have a deep faith in Christ and God, feel like prayer hasn't been something that they've like personally connected to. But then I see other people who have like really strong personal testimonies of it, and it seems like you have some good experiences.
Yeah, I would say I do have a really strong testimony in the power of prayer, but I would extend that also to meditation. And I think it's for two reasons. Prayer, because it's how we communicate with the divine. And it's, I think that prayer is more effective if we look at it as our will becoming in line with God's will, not us trying to impose our will on God's will. If you pray for it to snow and it's July, it's not going to snow unless you're in like Star Valley, Wyoming or something.
That's true.
but you see what I mean, right? Like, prayer is an opportunity for us to commune with God and for us to tell him what we are hoping and wanting for, but also for us to receive from him what he has in store for us.
I love that. That's beautiful. And that reminds me of what Jessica was just saying. Sometimes if you're lost, look around you.
Yeah, and that's
meditation.
the second reason.
That's like looking at where you're at and not trying to impose your will, but like, what is God?
Yeah.
Where is he placing me?
I think there's intense...
Or planting me.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's intense benefit to gain from stillness and quiet. I'm an introvert by nature, and so I think maybe I benefit from that more than other people do. But sometimes all you need to do is step back and look. You know what I mean? And going back to plants, I think that's why biodiversity is so important because sometimes we get so hyper focused on one plant, on one spot, on one thing.
Yeah, that's me. I ruminate.
But you can't do that. You can't do that. It will totally bring you down. But if you can get that wider perspective of the ecosystem, the ecosystem that this plant is part of, that I am part of, then you can gain a better perspective.
Yeah. Maybe you need to stop dumping water and fertilizer on that one plant and cultivate the things around it a little bit.
Exactly.
And that will support it in the ways it needs.
Yeah. Stop.
Yeah.
And it's a personal example. And like, I don't maybe like drawing attention to it, but I think it's a good example. Like, this is probably shown a little bit because when we were in the hotel, like I was like, the towel's kind of rough and I kind of like go quick and I like scraped it and it's like a little bit sore. But when I was a kid, this is pretty much just a freckle, I think. And like, I just picked at it. I was just like, I didn't like it, you know, like I was a part of myself I didn't like and I picked at it. And I feel like if I didn't like focus too much on it or ruminate, looked at like the whole face, you know, then I could have appreciated the beauty as a whole rather than like looking at the one spot.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think especially as women, we can get really fixated on our weight or how clear our skin is, I think is another really big one.
Or something. Every woman has like
a thing.
her hair. What's your biggest insecurity?
Yeah.
Everyone's like, do.
Yeah.
You know, they have
But
a
if
list.
we look at ourselves like God looks at ourselves, or like we look at a plant that we love, we see the whole thing. You know what I mean? There's the flower, there's the leaves, there's the roots, there's the mycelium that support it, there's the soil. It's like, you know, if we're just like, oh, that flower just died and so the plant isn't pretty anymore. Like some people do look at plants like that. But
they're missing out.
they are. They are. Like I've got some marigolds in my garden. I was just complaining to her that they weren't blooming, but they're still beautiful. I still love that they're there and they're still benefiting my garden. You don't have to have that bloom for the marigold to benefit the garden.
And it's not supposed to bloom at every time of the year.
Yeah, you can't expect every day to be
absolutely.
like a 4th of July.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
fireworks are a special occasion. Sometimes blooming is a special occasion.
Exactly. That's true.
I think it's really cool when I see that.
My favorite trees, I love trees. My favorite trees are the ones that are a little wonky. Or, you know, they
like me.
Yeah. Exactly. They grew in a strong wind or they, you know.
They've been through it.
Yeah. And I think we appreciate that. I appreciate that in all my favorite people is their uniqueness, you know, and if they hid that from me, I wouldn't get to love them as fully.
Yeah, trying to be a homogenous monoculture isn't the best thing.
Yeah, and I think another...
Yeah, and that's kind of like trying to make everybody the same.
Yeah.
Like rows.
Yeah.
Almost reminds me of the education system. Rows of classrooms.
exactly.
Trying to be A's.
One of my favorite...
so right.
One of my
wait,
favorite...
no, I got-
wait,
let me-
no.
Okay.
I'm asserting myself.
You go, girl.
One of my
good.
favorite analogies with plants and people is that we're all different plants. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Or even you could just do trees. You know, let's say humans are trees, okay? Some people were meant to be bonsai trees. Some people were meant to be fruit trees. Some people were meant to be oak trees. And those are all very different trees, have very different purposes, grow in very different climates, you know, need different things. And like somebody who is a bonsai tree and is going through all these, you know, getting cut down again and again and again, being restricted, they could be thinking to themselves like, I'm the same age as that huge oak tree over there.
I should be so much further.
I should be
That's
so much
beautiful.
further forward. I should be producing fruit, you know?
Yeah.
But they're not. But it's because they have a different purpose. And that's
That's so
exactly how
beautiful.
humans are.
That's beautiful.
beautiful.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah, that's something that has really helped me a lot too.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe a good place to like stop. Like, really, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Art. This has been an
Yeah.
awesome conversation.
Thank you.
And I'm
Thank
gonna
you.
look at plants in a different way. I mean,
My
like,
sister, everybody.
like it
so
reminds me.
cool.
I went running down and I saw this beautiful tree in our neighborhood back in Oklahoma or an adjacent neighborhood, and I was like, there's this guy on the phone. I was like, that's a beautiful tree. What is it? And he was like, it's a mimosa. Thanks. You know, he's just so happy. And
I love mimosa trees.
mimosas are pretty. But yeah. I just want to give you, you know, is there anything else that you'd like to shout out or say before we close?
Be kind to yourself and to the earth. That's all.
And tell us about your business.
Oh yeah, so I have I'm just barely starting it really. It's called Flourish Garden Consulting, and I help people to I'm not a landscape designer, but I help people to cultivate their landscapes, to choose plants that are adequate for the light and temperatures that they have and the different requirements that they have, so that they can feel empowered about the plants that they have. Because a lot of times it's really overwhelming to go into like a garden center and need to pick out the plants that you have, but I can kind of help people to narrow it down.
And to find native plants.
And to find native
That
plants.
will
Yeah,
work for
I
their
focus-
specific home and environment. Yeah,
exactly.
that's cool.
So you can give people my work email. They can email it. I can do it locally and remotely. But yeah, it's really fun.
Lara Wadsworth, thank you.
She's the
you're
coolest.
welcome. Thank you.
That's great. I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah,
That was so fun. That was like the best one.
I think yeah.
Really? Is the best
Oh
one?
man.
Laura.
It was like really